attention. This is a webinar series that is being held by Gary Chobolo, and I would like to start by introducing Sean O'Reilly as our moderator. Many of you should be familiar with Sean. Sean was a member of the first graduating class of law clerks from Toronto Centennial College in 1974 and went on to work as a senior litigation law clerk and a law clerk manager for several top Canadian law firms, specializing in litigation and a focus on medical malpractice, which led her into being involved in the field of natural medicine for over 40 years. Prior to joining the Canadian Association of Naturopathic Doctors in 2002 as the Executive Director of Government Relations, and held senior positions in two neurological companies and managed a holistic compounding pharmacy. During the 22-year tenure at CND, she was instrumental in promoting naturopathic doctors at the national level. Sean has many accomplishments, including securing GST, HST exemption for naturopathic services, expanding insurance coverage for patients, spearheading the annual Naturopathic Medicine Week, serving on a number of advisory committees, negotiating the National Insurance Malpractice Plan. Additionally, she helped obtain naturopathic coverage for veterans, oversaw the launch of national multimedia campaigns, assisted with traditional regulatory efforts, liaison extensively with various ministries and within the federal government. She has an impressive record, and recently, for all her years of recognition and dedication and work on behalf of the naturopathic profession, she was granted an honorary Doctor of Naturopathy degree by the CCNMN at the convocation in May 2025. Sean retired from the CND in 2024, and she now leads SOR Consulting, supporting individuals and organizations with policy and bylaw development, professional regulation, government relations, and we are so pleased to have Sean as our moderator for these webinars in the naturopathic profession. Our presenter is a lawyer as well as the trial panel lawyer on the insurance policy that is now the Naturopathic Doctors of Canada. Gary is a partner at Blaney McMurdy and chair of the Health Law Group. Prior to his law degree career, Gary was a practicing dentist for several years. Gary's background in dentistry and science allows him to bring a unique medical perspective to his health law practice. Gary has experience in health law matters involving professional regulation, defense of complaints, investigations, and fitness to practice issues, registration matters, exam appeals, professional liability issues, malpractice defense. Gary provides legal advice to all types of healthcare professionals before many regulatory colleges in Ontario and in other provinces of Canada. With regards to specifically working with his doctor with naturopathic doctor, Gary has been assisting NDs across Canada for 18 years in college complaints, investigations, fitness to practice, registration, and other college matters, most of which have been with Kono since its inception in 2015. As a result, Gary is well known to Kono as a result of defending naturopathic doctors in various matters over the years. Since 2021, Gary has presented live webinars on various jurisprudence topics of interest for the Canadian Association of Naturopathic Doctors, including on insurance billings, advertising, telemedicine, and professional issues, and he continues to do so on our direct program, which is the Naturopathic Doctors of Canada. Gary has presented a webinar to Exceptional ND in 2023 on legal liabilities faced by naturopathic doctors and risk management advice. In addition, Gary has taught and continues to teach jurisprudence risk management to upper year dental students at the University of Toronto Faculty of Dentistry for a number of years. So that is a wonderful intro for Gary and his many accomplishments, and we're very happy to have him to continue to be our presenter for the naturopathic doctors. Also on a panelist is Zaran, is an associate of Blaney McNerney in the health law group. Prior to becoming a lawyer, Zaran worked in a healthcare setting and has a first-hand knowledge regarding the issues that can arise in patient-provider relationships. She also has experience working for a regulatory college governing regulated health professionals, which uniquely positions her to provide strategic legal advice to her clients. Her health law practice involves matters of professional regulation, such as the defense of health professionals in regulatory and discipline matters before their respective regulatory college, including complaints, investigations, and registration issues. She also provides regulatory advice to health professionals with respect to compliance of applicable standards, guidelines, and policies. Zaran has experience in working with naturopathic doctors, particularly in the areas of practice related to investigations and complaints. She regularly advises naturopathic doctors on various issues such as scope of practice, advertising, informed consent, record keeping, to name a few, and related matters involving professionalism and misconduct. So with that, I would like to pass it over to Sean to start the moderation, and then over to Gary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanne, and good evening, everyone. I am very pleased to be joining as your moderator for tonight's webinar, which is on a topic I know that is becoming more and more important to all of you and your practices. Before handing the presentation over to Gary, I, of course, have a few housekeeping items for you. As stated, this webinar is being recorded, and as we're recording it, both video and audio have been turned off. The webinar recording will be posted on the Paisley Partners website within the next few weeks. In addition, all of those attending will receive a letter certifying your attendance at tonight's webinar. Letters will be sent out as soon as Paisley Partners receives confirmation of your attendance and duration of your attendance from the web host. Please note that in order to receive a letter of certification of attendance, you must attend the full presentation. The webinar does qualify for self-study CE in most jurisdictions. For instance, in Ontario with Kono, it qualifies for category B. For those of you in other jurisdictions, please check the requirements with your regulator, and in unregulated jurisdictions with your association. Please enter any questions that you may have during tonight's presentation in the chat, and we will address them during the Q&A that will follow the slides. The information presented tonight is general in nature. If you have questions regarding a specific issue or situation with a patient in your practice, or questions about your policy or the coverage it provides, please reach out directly to Paisley Partners. Their contact information will be put up at the end of tonight's presentation. Finally, should you have any technical difficulties, and heaven only knows they happen, please email Megan Quinlan. Megan is the individual that sent you the link to get into tonight's webinar. You can reach her at mquinlan@blaney.com. So that's MQUINLAN at Blaney, BLANEY.com. Those are the end of my housekeeping notes. And with that, I will pass the torch over to Gary to get started with the presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Joanne, for the intros. So, yeah, the topic tonight is difficult patients and strategies to prevent complaints. As Joanne said during the intro, I've been working on naturopath files for 18 years, and it's involved defending complaints and investigations all across Canada, BC, Alberta, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, and Ontario. And also defend malpractice claims as well, too. But there are a lot more complaints than there are malpractice claims too. So how this came about is even recently we received some referrals or new clients from Paisley Partners and then from the insurance that were about pending complaints, that something went wrong and the patients were on the trajectory to complain and or sue. And so we were retained to kind of assist the naturopaths in avoiding that too. And that's what this topic is about, to pass along some of those tips to do. And so you can use proactively and kind of see that a complaint is coming and hope possibly avert it too. So this is just a general disclaimer. I mean, what do you expect from lawyers? But that this is just general advice and general practice tips, not specific legal advice. We haven't covered all standards and legislation, all jurisdictions. You can't assume that even if we do cite a rule, that it applies. And you should refer, of course, to your own regulatory college association. The cases are a compilation of cases and scenarios too. So with that, let's get into it. So these are the topics for today. Why patients complain, case scenarios, telltale signs that a complaint is forthcoming. What about paying money to withdraw a complaint? We'll talk about that. Zarin will address that. Look at even appeal cases that could be seen as bribes and reasons why you obviously shouldn't do that. And then we'll conclude with practical tips to avoid a complaint, and then we'll have question and answer session too. So yeah, as Sean said, you have any questions, just put them in the chat, and then at the end, Sean will go through them and will present them to us too. So the first one is why patients complain. And you see from the graphic, it's really easy to make a complaint. It used to be you'd have to write a letter. Now all you have to do is log on, submit an online form. Doesn't have to be well written or anything, and you have a complaint too. And interesting, it doesn't have to be the patient that complains. Anyone can complain about anyone else. You could complain, your spouse could have seen a naturopathic doctor and you didn't like something that you heard, and they're fine with it, but you're not. You could complain. And I've had complaints, dealt with those kind of complaints. There's kind of a formula. This is obviously anecdotal. Why do patients complain? Usually you see this, and again, I don't just do complaints for naturopathic doctors. I do for doctors, dentists, pharmacists, nurses, physiotherapists, pretty much all regulated health professionals. And you see a common theme. So what is that? Problems. The slide I have when I do the speech for this talk for dentists is I have a slide of pain and some with ice, because obviously dentist treatment causes more pain. But a problem, something's not going right. The middle thing is money. It's expensive. Either they paid you money for treatment or now they have to pay more treatment. And the last one's key. As you see there, it's broken communication. Those are kind of the key factors behind complaints in obviously different variations. Patient factors that we sometimes see: past bad experiences, lack of trust. They might not be happy with their conventional MD. They might not be happy with the past naturopathic doctor, and you're a new naturopathic doctor to them. Communication barriers, language could be issues, complicated treatment plans either not provided or not properly explained. Medical factors, they have a lot of illnesses and complications, and if so, it's more things can go wrong. And if things go wrong, sometimes if they paid a lot of money, they're looking for some accountability. And that ties into lack of financial resources, which are always a concern. Then the last one is third-party influences too. A lot of times, and I've had handled complaints, patients pleased with but the family members aren't pleased. Maybe they think this isn't good. You need to go to conventional MD or things like that. That's what you're really up against too. Also, another factor, the type of practice. You're in a high-end practice, let's say downtown in a major urban center. Patients will have to spend more money, more expectations, which come with more risk. And then you have the cutting-edge practices. and which could feed into high level patient expectations and outcomes. You also might be attracting patients who are more desperate for solutions because they're not getting them at either seeing conventional MD or other naturopaths. So they are coming looking for solutions, and if you don't deliver, that could be an issue. Unreasonable expectations that unfortunately you might not be able to meet, and suggesting replacement for conventional medical treatment, which is something you shouldn't do. And you have to be careful because if it doesn't go well, that could be the basis for a complaint. So who are potential adversaries? And I put that in quotation marks because you would hope that your patient's not an adversary. Unfortunately, if they make a complaint, it kind of seems that way. It's always a concern. Patient leaves the clinic okay, but once they speak to blank, they become unhappy. Who's blank? Could be a family member, a subsequent ND, a competitor, their MD, disgruntled staff members. I think I've had complaints that were kind of motivated by all of those. And there's, of course, insurance companies can make complaints. They do audits, they do profiling, and they can lodge a complaint to the college about billing issues too. So I thought would be helpful to go through some complaint case scenarios and to kind of give you some scenarios, talk about the facts, and also point out learning lessons. And these are cases where complaints might have been averted too. So the first one is a case involving injection pain. So here are the facts. The patient received an injection from a naturopathic doctor. They developed pain the next day in the arm and contacted the clinic, and they started to make demands. And I say demands, and they were demands. They were writing emails, very difficult emails, and they wanted answers to questions. Why did this happen? What could be done to fix the problem? They wanted accountability, ownership from the clinic and the naturopathic doctor in terms of who's responsible. They asked what happens if the condition does not get better. They wanted money. They wanted compensation for harm, and they demanded a response within 7 days. So these are kind of the signs, and I think we'll speak in a later slide. You start to see this. Patients will only take so much. I'm a sports fan, so a lot of things I use sports analogies. A lot of times, it's 3 strikes and you're out. They'll give you 1 thing, goes wrong, 2, and then 3, that's it. Sometimes it's less than 3. Sometimes it could be 1 strike and you're out too. So this is the patient. They got pain. They are not happy, and they wanted answers. So the analysis and plan, this is basically to go, okay, here's what happened. Here's, how this was handled. First of all, this isn't that rare scenario. We actually had a stretch where we're seeing a few of these kind of complaints where patients have gone in for IVs or injections and they get pain. Again, what is this? Remember, I have in red here the slide I had with here, problems plus money plus lack of communication. That's what's happened here. They have a problem, the problem's pain. Money is the money they spent to come in. Lack of communication, perhaps it wasn't explained to them that they could expect to have some pain. Or even when they followed up, they weren't properly followed up. So this type of scenario is definitely heading towards a complaint, because if the patient's not satisfied, they're going to keep going. They're going to want accountability, and either they get it from you, or they'll go Google and it'll take them 10 minutes or so to figure out, oh, I can make a complaint to the regulatory college. So when they start to make demands, that's your sign. This is their one last chance to satisfy them, perhaps to satisfy them, because you might not be able to, because that's where they're tracking. Success for me in dealing with doing who knows how many complaints over like 18 years, the reason I teach is to try to help the profession. And success for you is not getting a complaint. Success isn't getting a complaint because I could defend it. No, if you get the complaint, you're already behind the 8 ball. It's preferable to not get a complaint because once the complaint happens, anything could happen too. That's why I said here, success is no complaint, not a successful complaint outcome. Yes, if you get a complaint, obviously you want a good outcome. It's better to not get the complaint in the first place. So that a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how to steer towards not getting a complaint. So what do you need to do? You need to engage the patient. If you disengage them, stick your head in the sand. You don't really want to deal with it, and who wants to deal with it? It's a negative. They're not happy. You're kind of stressed out and worried. But if you don't engage them, they'll be like, okay, you're not giving me what I want to hear. Fine, I'll go to the college. And like I said, lack of response, if a patient's following up with you and it seems serious, it almost guarantee a complaint. Why wouldn't they make a complaint? Now, I wrote here, is it okay to admit you did something wrong with your technique? Okay to not take responsibility? Question mark. You have to be very careful with that. And the Paisley partners will tell you insurance companies don't want you to make admissions, especially before you have legal advice, because you might be prejudicing the case and the ability to defend it. So you got to be very careful, and that's why it says if necessary, involve the liability insurer. And later on, Rashawn from Paisley Partners is going to speak about reporting a matter too. So what's the plan? Dialogue with the patient, explain and reimburse, perhaps. What if you did not feel you did anything wrong? Reimburse, perhaps. The key thing is, again, not to bribe someone, but let's put it this way. So the process works. If this matter came to me, I would say I'd contact the naturopathic doctor. I'd say, send me all the records. I want to review the records. Send me any emails too. I'd look everything
We're having a bit of a technical difficulty, everybody, and we're working on it. We'll get Gary unfrozen soon.
Okay. Am I back there? Hello?
Yes, Gary, you're back.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So let me just put this back up. Okay. So, Sean, just let me know where I was on this slide when I got cut off.
You had just finished, you were about to go to the objective. Slide 12.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, what I was saying is the objective for this is to engage the patient, at least explore the opportunity to resolve the this matter with them. Because if you don't do anything, you're almost surely get a complaint. Maybe you'll be able to satisfy them. It might be different things. They might want an apology. They want some money, perhaps, if you know, if that's the case and there's some damages or injury. Of course, you should involve the liability insurer, but you at least want to give yourself the opportunity to do that. Okay, everything's still okay?
Megan's
Hello?
doing some rearranging, and we need to bring up the slides again.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. There.
There, good.
Yeah. Okay, let me just move this over too. Okay. The next scenario is a case involving communication issues too. So this is a case whereby a naturopathic doctor saw a patient for an assessment consultation, and at that time they promised to provide a treatment plan and supporting resources. Unfortunately, they didn't make good on their promise, didn't provide the treatment plan, didn't provide the resources to read, and the patient followed up by email saying, hey, where's the things you promised? Patient also called and spoke with the receptionist who advised that the ND was dealing with personal matters but would get back to them. Time went by, nothing received. Further time went by. The patient had enough and called the clinic asking for their records because they're transferring out. Like I say, baseball, 3 strikes, you're out. That's maybe strike 2. Strike 3 was further delay before the records received. And then the patients have had enough of this. Complained on the basis they paid for treatment, were promised a treatment plan, which they didn't receive in a timely manner, and also the records were provided late. So what happened with this? The issues, the analysis of this is that you as a naturopathic doctor have a professional legal responsibility to follow up with patients in a timely manner, especially patients who have seen for a consult and promised a treatment plan to. This is even during times when you as an ND are dealing with personal matters, perhaps. You're still legally required to follow up with patients in a timely manner. The learning point from this is patients will only tolerate so much before seeking other remedy. It only takes a few minutes for them to figure out how to make a complaint to the college. And once they complain, they'll inevitably throw the book at you in terms of everything you did. This was wrong, that was wrong. So you have to be very responsive to this. You can't just ignore them. If you do, you risk, and let's see, it's the is the share screen on or no?
Yes, you're fine. You can see the slide.
And it's changing? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't want them to complain because then everything is open game. Then they might start complaining about the treatment you didn't, or you saw them, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. So the lesson is, even if you dealing with personal matters, still check your emails and your calls, follow up on patients even briefly, because once you go silent, they're going to get upset and you put yourself at risk for a complaint. And in this case, it was the lack of any response which upset the patient and prompted the complaint. And the Regulate College, in the end, deemed this to be a lapse in judgment and a lack of insight into patient needs and communication, too. The third one is a case scenario involving multiple issues. So this patient had concerns about a number of things. Some you could say, well, these aren't even big things, but they add up. About the appointment not beginning at the scheduled time. Appointment shorter than what time they paid for. They said, oh, I thought I was paying for a 1 hour consultation. Things not done during exam that should have been. We're interested in ordering a specific supplement, which they did, but there was a delay in receiving this. They made multiple follow-up calls. And really, once patients pay, they want it, and they want it now. So, and there was a delay in sending patient treatment recommendations. The patient was seen as a vulnerable patient, could be an elderly patient or one with medical conditions. The straw that probably broke the camel's back and prompted the complaint was charging a fee for copying the records. And I think it was like a really small amount too. So the analysis of this, again, I think, I put here the baseball analogy. Patients only put up with so much. 3 strikes and you're out. At some point, the grievances add up and a complaint's inevitable. The learning point is, after you become aware that a patient has some issues early on, make them a priority. These are the ones that are going to lead to a complaint. Even if it's little issues like this, you still want to deal with it. And as I'm sure you know, everything's more litigious out there. In the past, patients might have had grievances and their response would be, okay, bye-bye, see you, going to another office. Now, they'll do that, but by the way, we're also complaining too. The lesson here is, don't let the issues pile up. Reach out to the patient directly if they do pile up, and apologize. Keep that, engage them, keep the communication. Don't let the communication break down, because when it does, you're vulnerable to get a complaint. And again, you might go, well, who cares? These are all small issues. Big deal, they give a complaint. That's not the issue. It's when the college comes in, the door's open, all of a sudden let's see your records. Then they see, your records aren't good. Or they start looking, how come you're, if you're using Jane app, how come you didn't sign your patient charts? Or how come you just signed them after the complaint? And all of a sudden, you have all these other things the college is looking at. Trust me, no one's that good a practitioner that they want the college to look at their records. They could look, there's always something finding. The best advice is to avoid a complaint. So these aren't, obviously something really bad happens that might lead a complaint. But these were you could say, little things. And the one first, injection pain, then some communication issues and promises not met. And then this is one with multiple issues, and they add up. They get a complaint. A complaint's no good, and you want to avoid it if possible. So I'm going to turn it over now to Zoran, who's going to speak about whether or not it's advisable to pay a patient money to withdraw a complaint, not make a complaint. Can you do this? Should you do it? Zoran?
Thanks, Gary. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I'm going to be talking about whether or not offering a refund for services or any sort of monetary payment is appropriate. If you are, trying to incentivize somebody to not file a complaint or to withdraw a complaint. And so my section will touch upon whether you can do this or not, and if you should even do it in the first place. Next slide. So the answer to this is a resounding no. And we will spend the next few slides discussing sort of different cases to understand why that is the case. But long story short, there will be two sort of scenarios in which you want to maybe potentially pay a client or a patient money. And that would be the first case is if they've already filed a complaint and now you were asking them to withdraw it for a specific sum of money, or you're trying to give a patient that you see may be on their way to making a complaint and you want to offer them some sort of a monetary settlement so that way they're incentivized to not do so. So in both of these sort of situations, a regulatory college will see this as both inappropriate and unprofessional conduct. And the reason being is nothing can take away the right for a patient or a member or someone from the public to complain about naturopathic doctor, for instance, if they're under a regulated college. And so this is within the legislation. And so the college takes this very seriously if, a health professional is now asking a member of the public to not file a complaint against them. So the consequences to this are quite serious. It could result in a caution. And what that means is this is a public finding that would get posted on your regulatory profile, which would state that, you've been cautioned against not following a certain standard. And in this case, it would be, paying a patient and asking them to withdraw their complaint or not to complain. And so if the allegations are sufficiently serious, it could also result in the college issuing a new investigation altogether to see if, let's say this happened in other scenarios, if it's a widespread issue, and it could result in even further problems. And the reason being is the college or a regulatory body will see this as a bribe, essentially. And it boils down to the fact that it's the regulator's job to protect the public and not necessarily the member who is practicing, unfortunately. Next slide. Okay, so in order to kind of understand how you can give a refund or some sort of monetary settlement in a way that does not appear offside with regulatory college's guidance, it's a good idea to kind of discuss particular cases. And so I'll be discussing a few bribe cases so that way you can get an idea of what are the parameters in which you can offer money to a patient. Side. So the first case I'll be discussing is the case of KD versus CW, who is a registered psychotherapist. So this particular case is involves a complaint with the College of Psychotherapists of Ontario. So it's not particularly with naturopaths, but because again, they're a regulated health professional, it's the same sort of rules that apply. So what happened in this case is the person that complained was a counselor. So they weren't a regulated health professional. So they were neither a psychologist or a psychotherapist, but they entered into an agreement with a registered psychotherapist to rent some office space. And the arrangement was that they were hoping to receive some referrals from this psychotherapist for their counseling services, and also to offer some psychological services under a supervision agreement with one of the psychologists that worked at this clinic as well. And it's important to remember that a counselor can't provide psychological services because they're not a regulated psychologist, and that's why you have certain conditions under a supervision agreement that you would need to meet in order to provide this sort of service. So essentially, the complaint involves a whole host of things, but the counselor who was renting this office space, essentially the supervision was not meeting the requirements that was required by the College of Psychotherapists of Ontario. There were multiple concerns with the business practices, but the most relevant in terms of what we're discussing today is that there were allegations of coercion into accepting a settlement in exchange for not making a complaint. So essentially, the counselor was unhappy with the arrangement. There were some business issues going on between them that led to the complaint. And then the registered psychotherapist essentially offered the counselor a $3,000 settlement agreement. And then the complainant agreed to not initiate any further complaints or legal actions. So the issue here is that the terms were vague, right? So a $3,000 settlement was offered and the counselor agreed not to file a complaint. However, there was nothing written in their agreement as to what that $3,000 was intended to cover. So in terms of the regulatory college who is now reviewing this matter, it gives them the perception that this could potentially be a bribe. So the college in this case did acknowledge that it was within the complainant's purview to decline that offer. It wasn't like they were obligated to accept it, but the issue here is because the release and the wording of it was not, sorry, Gary, you're not on the screen anymore. It looks like an email.
Is that on now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically the release was unclear as to what that amount was intended to cover. Okay, next slide. So the HBAR, which is the Health Professions Appeal and Review Board, essentially what happened is the CRPO, the College of Regulated Psychotherapists of Ontario, issued reminders and advice. So this is a sanction that a remediation measure that they can take in terms of what they decided to do with the complaint. They gave a reminder to the psychotherapist that, when you're in your business practices, you have to have accurate representation of your services on the invoices. Also an obligation to address any issues that were reported within your practice. But what's relevant to us in terms of this particular topic is that if someone is wanting to make a complaint to the college, you need to avoid the perception of a bribe because the mandate of the college is to protect the public. And so they don't want any sort of indication that there was a bribe and that somebody was taken, their right to complain was taken away for any matter. So the lesson here is that you can offer a monetary settlement if you choose to, but when you do so, it is very important to include a description of what that payment's purpose is. So for instance, let's say you want to offset their legal fees because they had to consult, let's say, a paralegal to see whether or not they had a case, or you're refunding their services because they were unhappy with their initial intake appointment, so you're refunding that particular fee. So it's important to actually outline what it is you are refunding or giving them the money for, because it cannot be for the purpose of withdrawing your complaint. And that is the main sort of lesson here, because the public should never feel blocked from making a complaint. And so it is, within a party's right to also agree not to make a complaint, but that payment shouldn't be offered in response to that. Next slide. Okay, so the next case is the case of DBMD versus LB. So this is a decision that was under review from the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. So what happened in this case is the complainant essentially purchased eyeglasses based on a prescription that the MD, the medical doctor, had given them. So this particular medical doctor also did prescriptions for eyeglasses. However, they were unhappy with their results of that prescription. So they actually attended with an optometrist and got an updated prescription. And that at that point, the complainant was happy with the eyeglasses that they had received, but the optician and the optometrist that were helping this particular complainant also kind of questioned the accuracy of the initial eye exam that they received from the MD, the medical doctor. And so the complainant went back to the MD and, asked for a reimbursement for the cost of the eyeglasses. And so they worked out a fee and agreement that they reached together. But then the MD actually found out that the complainant had paid less for the glasses than he had purported to. So after hearing about this information, the MD reduced the amount of the settlement that they had initially agreed to. And so in response to him, paying less than what he had actually agreed to, the complainant filed his initial complaint, not only for the inaccurate prescriptions, but because there was a reduction of the initial agreed upon refund. So another important fact of this particular case is that not only did the MD, then contact the complainant, after he had already filed his complaint, the MD asked if he could refund that original refund that they had agreed to in exchange for him withdrawing the complaint. And he actually attended this complainant's house to ask him to do so, and then got him to sign a letter of an agreement, which he then sent to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, stating essentially the complainant has agreed to withdraw his complaint. So here, this was a very blatant example of someone being paid to withdraw their complaint, and evidence to that effect by way of this signed agreement. So the ICRC reviewing this matter had significant concerns with, first negotiating of a refund, but also now signing a particular letter to specifically withdraw a complaint, and decided that it was completely inappropriate and amounted to a bribe. Next slide. So then the HBAR, when it got appealed to that level, they essentially confirmed the decision of the College of Surgeons and Physicians of Ontario, which is that they had initially ordered an oral caution. So this is one of the public findings that I had mentioned earlier, which gets posted on your website profile if you've been cautioned by the college for not meeting a certain standard. So in terms of the actual decision, they didn't have any issues with the differences in the prescription because they were minor enough that it wasn't any sort of issue with the MD's ability to offer this service, but they had a significant concern about the fact that there was a blatant bribe and there was an obligation for the college to investigate. So this part is kind of the lesson for this particular case, and that is, even if someone has decided to withdraw their complaint, it doesn't really matter because the complaint is now there. What it's done is it's opened the doors for the college to come and investigate. So even if a complainant now says, I want to withdraw my complaint, it doesn't really matter. The college still has an obligation to investigate under the legislation, and the complainant no longer has control of the proceeding. And so under the legislation, there's a public interest duty for the college to carry out this investigation, and they will independently investigate whatever concerns have been brought to light, whether or not the complainant has now decided to withdraw their complaint. And another finding they specifically made, that it was highly inappropriate to sign a written letter with evidence of the bribe as well. Okay, next paragraph. So in terms of a refund, yes, you can offer a refund, but the important thing to remember is that it cannot be linked to any sort of agreement where a complainant or a patient or a member of the public is offering to withdraw their complaint or agreeing to not make a complaint. So that is very important. And not only should you not do this in a written way through, for example, an agreement that we had discussed earlier, but also it's very important not to make any sort of assurances verbally. And that's because we've had many cases where patients actually have been taping conversations or, saving all of this evidence to later, provide to the college. So when you are, let's say giving a certain sort of settlement or refund to a patient, you kind of have to do it with the risk that they may still make a complaint. So it is a gamble, but it is unfortunately the only sort of way to appropriately go about providing a refund to a potential complainant or an actual complainant. And it does work in a lot of circumstances, because a lot of times we see in patients that complain to the college, they're just looking for their money back because they're upset with some sort of service. Unfortunately, the college, regulatory college, does not have does not have the power to order a member to give a refund to anyone. So they never make a decision on whether or not a refund should be offered in that circumstance. But we see in many types of complaint matters that we deal with, the patient would outline all of the, you know, grievances they've had with this particular health professional, and in the end say, and they didn't give me my money back. So a lot of times that is their motive for making a complaint, and so a complaint could be avoided by giving a refund, but you just can't expect it, and that's the main kind of takeaway. So you can not only refund the actual fee, the expense that was incurred. Let's say they weren't happy with the assessment, so you can refund their initial assessment fee, but you could also give money for damages. So an example of this would be, let's say in the example that Gary discussed in the beginning, if there was some sort of IV that was being done to a patient and they had pain or bruising at the site of injection as a result, you may pay them a certain amount for the pain and suffering that they had, maybe because they weren't able to move their arm, or they had a significant sort of swelling that prevented them from being able to continue with their daily activities. However, if you are paying money for damages, this is a legal issue and not just a factual issue. So you do need the input of your insurer or your lawyer, and you would need a signed release as well, so they're not now suing you again for these damages you've already paid off. And so an important tip is, before just sending a release to a patient, which is a lot of legal jargon and it could scare them off, it's important to get them engaged in the process, trying to understand why they're complaining, what their concerns are, and sort of try to work with them to resolve it before just sending a release and getting legal right off the bat. Next. Okay, so now we're just going to talk about some practical tips to avoid a complaint that kind of tie together a lot of things that I've already discussed. And Gary has discussed as well. So when you do notice a problem, what do you do in that circumstance? So it's really important to deal with that situation promptly and not hold off on getting back to a potential complaint patient or somebody who you think might potentially complain. And it's really important because a lot of times, as Gary mentioned, they're upset because they didn't get an answer, or they feel like their concerns are not being heard. So where possible, if you are able to resolve the dispute in a timely manner before it actually gets to, let's say, a malpractice lawsuit or a college complaint, you fare off way better in that circumstance. And the reason being is, even if they then, get their refund and decide, okay, I'm going to withdraw my complaint, it doesn't really matter. As we've discussed, the college or the regulatory body can still pursue that investigation and that complaint, whether or not the complainant wants to go through with it. And so it's best practice to try to resolve it before it even gets to that complaint stage. So it's important to find out the facts when you're talking to the patient or the client. Review their chart, speak to any witnesses about what happened at the time, see what you did in that situation, what kind of problems or issues arose. And in terms of whether or not you should call a patient back right away, let's say you received an email about, some issues that a patient had with their particular appointment. Instead of calling them back right away because, you're worried and anxious and you want to resolve it before the patient does anything, it's important to come up with a plan first. And so, next slide. Before you call the patient back, it's important to kind of sorry, next slide. Thanks, Gary. Call the patient back. It's important to be calm, look at the records, see what's going on in the scenario before you actually go and respond to them. So try not to be accusatory. Don't make excuses or place blame. Don't, lie or make any misrepresentations. And most importantly, don't panic or make any admissions because, you're worried and you just want to, satisfy the patient so that way they don't complain. So you admit to something. It's really important that you really don't say much in this sort of conversation, but rather you're listening. Because at this point, what's really important is to listen to the complainant, understand, what their story is, what are they upset about, What are they looking for? What is their motivation in, discussing this issue with you? And try to be understanding without admitting that anything wrong was done in that circumstance. And then you can say to the patient, okay, I will review the chart and get back to you. And at that moment, you can use that time to talk to, let's say, a colleague. Maybe they've had a similar situation. Again, a lawyer, if there are, damages or monetary settlements involved, or your insurance broker. Okay, next. So after the call, assess the situation. Okay, what are their main concerns? So is it monetary? Because a lot of the times, when we do get complaints, a lot of people just want their money back. And if it is, not that much money, or it's not very contentious, it's really worth it to just offer that refund, because at the end of the day, if that's all they're looking for, you can avoid a lot more in terms of the consequences to you as a health professional if it becomes an actual complaint with the college, which not only involves a lot of time and emotional sort of resources, but also financial as well to deal with. If they have pain or discomfort, or if they're feeling ignored, or they want some accountability, or is it poor communication? These are things that are important to ascertain, because a lot of the complaints we get after, one of the things that we regularly see is they didn't pay me back, or they didn't refund me. The second most common thing we see is they didn't say sorry, or they didn't take responsibility, or they weren't, listening to my concerns. So that's really important, not just the monetary piece, but also the accountability piece, that they want to feel like, you've acknowledged that something has gone wrong, and whether they're in pain or discomfort, they would want some acknowledgement about that. And that could make the difference between somebody deciding to complain and not complain. But another important thing to also look into is whether or not their issue is an emergency, or if they require urgent treatment. So when you get a patient that seems like they're upset and they're complaining, the first thing you might want to do is not interact with them, or consider, whether or not you can even treat this patient, and you might want to distance yourself from this patient. However, it's important to actually assess what is going on with this patient. So in the earlier example that I gave, let's say it was an IV error and the bruise happened, you might need to, assess them and see if there was anything that you need to do in terms of follow-up as a health professional, if their wound is actually something that needs to be followed up with, or needs a referral to the emergency department. That is still your obligation, whether or not you are deciding to terminate this particular person as a patient or not. Next slide. So in terms of the termination of a patient, you can do so, but the main thing here is that there has to be a reasonable basis to wanting to end that relationship, and it always has to be in the patient's best interests. So you can do so, but then you can risk further alienation and a potential complaint from being lodged by this particular patient. So it's always good to try to make reasonable efforts to resolve the situation and apply, your good clinical judgment in that circumstance, and compassion to see what the most appropriate course of action is in those particular circumstances, before you go straight to deciding whether or not you want to terminate. And if you do reach the conclusion that you do want to terminate the patient, because now you no longer, you have a significant breakdown in the patient-provider relationship, there are also college rules that you have to follow. And you have to make sure that you're only discontinuing the professional services, and this is absolutely needed, unless that discontinuation would reasonably be regarded as by members as appropriate, having considered what are the reasons for discontinuing the service. So for instance, let's say the treatment has concluded. So that is an easy way to say, okay, there's no longer anything further to do because we've done that specific treatment that they wanted to. But in cases where you have a patient that might still be someone who is your ongoing patient, it's harder to do so. So in that case, you would have to give your particular reasons. Why is there a significant breakdown in the relationship? Are they no longer listening to your health advice? What is the condition of the patient? Are they able to get quality service anywhere else? Are there alternate services available? And what are the consequences of ending this relationship? So are they able to get alternate services? Are they able to get emergency care? Because you are still responsible for that patient until the termination has officially happened and they've gotten another care provider that can provide them with what they need. So those are just some things to keep in mind before you go that route of wanting to terminate a patient if there has been some sort of a breakdown, especially because if someone is wanting to file a complaint, it's likely they may not want to pursue any further services with you.
Oh, thanks, Zoran, for going through those slides. That was really good. A couple just quick points to add. One about the refund. And if a patient does, if you do make a refund and let's say the patient withdraws a complaint, the first thing that the college thinks is, oh, I wonder how much the doctor paid off the patient to get them to withdraw. So the college has seen everything. The other point too about what Zoran was just talking about, terminating a patient. I've handled some complaints, really nasty and aggressive, and still the patients still want to see the doctor. And of course, the doctor doesn't want to have anything to do with them. But yes, you still have to see them. Well, no, but you still have to follow these rules here about terminating a patient too. Regardless, the rules don't say, well, if they complain, you could just ignore them. And Zoran covered the things. So I want to now turn over for just a couple minutes to Rashawn Phillip from Paisley Partners, who's going to just talk a bit about reporting matters and obtaining legal advice. Rashawn?
Thank you, Gary and Zareen. I think most of you are thinking about what do I do if and when some kind of a scenario like this or anything close happens to you. So what we say is, when in doubt, just give us a call or send us an email, right? We'll take a look at it. We can talk to you. We can look at the actual scenario. We report it to the insurance company. So if you're in doubt, you think that a patient might complain or a patient indicates that they might complain, let us know. You can call us at 877-427-8683. If you call us after hours, we have an after hours claims team that it goes to. Let them know that this is a malpractice claim and they will advise you to call us the next day. But the best way is send an email to programs@paisley-partners.com. This is the same email where you get your policy documents, your renewal emails. So you can just reply back to one of those emails or take a copy of this email and write to us. I'm sure most of you have gotten in touch with us and written to us on this email anyway, but yes, give us a call or write to us in this email. Just one more thing that I wanted to reiterate is when you get a letter from your college, it is considered an actual claim, because we get a lot of calls where people have already responded once a regulatory complaint has come in, and then they get in touch with us well into the claim. So anytime you get a letter from your regulator, just let us know. We'll let the insurance company know to note on file, and somebody will get in touch with you to respond to this. So we're here to make sure that these things are taken care of. So reach out to us.
Thanks, Rashawn. And I could add to that. Over the years, we get retained at different stages. Sometimes at the initial, when a complaint comes in, we help right from the start. Sometimes it's after they've done a response and then there's a follow-up and they want help. Sometimes it's after the decision they want to appeal. So as Rashawn says, the earlier we get involved, the more we can help you. If you respond on your own, you're kind of stuck with what you've stated, whether it's good or bad too. We would have to work with it, as opposed to if we get involved earlier on, we could kind of go through things, because don't forget, the brokers know and we know all the steps which follow. When you're involved in this, a complaint, it's your first time, you don't really know what's coming next. We do. And we could, try to steer you way towards getting the best outcome. So just a few slides, and then we're going to open it up to questions. I don't know if any are in the chat, but if you have some, you could put them in there. So an action plan and kind of a summary. The best outcome with any matter, any upset patient, is resolution. It's least stressful, least expensive, make the patient happy. Maybe you'll retain them and their family and perhaps avoid a complaint. The worst outcomes is a regulatory college complaint. Again, it doesn't matter if you go, oh, I can defend this. You don't want the complaint in the first place. That's the best advice. Another bad outcome is a malpractice lawsuit. But for that, you need to have some damage. You can't, no one's going to take on a case and sue you because you were rude to them or something. There has to be some actual harm or damages too. And both can occur at the same time. In my opinion, handling both, the regulatory complaint is more distressing. It takes a long time to resolve. It involves your certificate to practice, and other issues can come up and advise. So specific advice to try and avoid a complaint is key advice: respond by their deadline. You know, you're like, who does this person think they are dictating, tell me this? You know what? I'll show them who's boss. No, wrong answer, because respond before they push the button, as I showed, and send the complaint. And usually if they give a deadline, they're like, okay, I'm gonna, you don't meet it, they'll send it, because the next move can be a complaint. Get them engaged. Actually, the more you talk to them and email them, as provided you say and do the right thing, the better, because then they get engaged in the process. And the more they're dealing with you, the less likely they're going to go, okay, I've had it, and now I'm going to complain too. So get them engaged. They're at least being heard. That's part of what they want to hear. Get them focused on resolution and give them what they want within reason. Offer explanations as to what occurred. Be responsive. Don't discount what they're feeling or what they believe. Don't be overly defensive. Arguably, don't be defensive at all. Be accountable, yes, but you still have to be careful making admissions too. Apologize, be empathetic. Offer follow-up treatment if necessary. Offer referral if requested. Key concerns, again, to sum up this whole talk and the purpose of it: be aware and sensitive to warning signs when communicating with and treating patients, disgruntled patients, because disgruntled patient, like I said, it's step by step. It could end up in complaint. Communicate as clearly as possible in a timely manner. And if problems arise, fix them within reason and fix them promptly. So those are our slides. Now, Sean, if you've received any questions or we're going to receive questions, we'd be glad to address them.
Thank you, Gary and Zarin and Rashawn, for all that terrific information. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment in the chat. People, we do have about 15 minutes if you've got questions, or maybe you just need to sit with all the information, take it all in.
Yeah. I thought I saw one pop up.
There we are. Okay. Here we have one from Whitney Qualley. Direct. What kind of billing would insurance companies complain about? Okay. Let me just get the rest of it. And what kind of examples? So what things do the insurance companies complain about?
Oh, insurance companies?
Yes. The third party insurance companies. And maybe I can help you with it a bit there. In the past few years, unfortunately, there has been an increase in fraudulent invoices, etc., put forward not by NDs but by other people presenting as those NDs. But I also know that the insurance companies may complain about the amount of money that a patient was charged for a treatment under the plan, for example. Gary, can you think of others?
Yeah, so that was the first word that was going to come out of my mouth before you said it, is fraud. What do insurance companies? First of all, insurance companies want to see they're not getting, for lack of better words, ripped off by the patient and or by the naturopathic doctor. So they look for things, and unfortunately, there are situations where they are. The insurance companies have, and we deal with a lot of this, and I've seen this with naturopathic doctors across Canada. they start with their initial concern is this like blatant fraud? Because really, blatant fraud means patient didn't even come in. There's no patient. Maybe somehow the office got the insurance information. Maybe it's a spouse. Is this like blatant fraud? You're just putting things through that didn't even happen. Too. That's not good. Insurance company's not going to be happy. They're going to pursue it. They're going to want money back. They'll probably contact their college, and in even extreme cases, will contact the police too. So that's one aspect. Then they look at later things, such as, and I see Megan's just made a comment. If you have any questions, you could type them in the chat too. Then they look at different aspects of this. Oh, okay, maybe you're billing for things that shouldn't be covered. Maybe, for example, cosmetic things aren't usually covered by group insurance. So maybe you're covering, you're billing something about, billing for cosmetic, but you're calling it something else. So what will they do? They'll usually ask for the records and see what the records reflect. What do the records state was done? And then, if they see, they usually work, the insurance company, where there's smoke, there's fire. So if they see, oh, there looks to be a lot of unusual things here, that might prompt them to report to the college, because they know the college will be more than glad to go in and to investigate and to ask for other charts and things too. So I think, Sean, that answers the question, what types of things they look for. Then they could look for things, okay, you billed for this procedure. Is it accurately described in terms of what you do? They basically, the insurance company is looking, we have a policy, we've agreed to pay for these services. We want to make sure we're paying for things that we're supposed to be paying for, and not paying for things, or not being, things stolen from. Too.
Yeah, exactly. Another good question has come in. Does our policy through Paisley Partners cover the cost of consulting with a lawyer in these instances? I think I can answer that one, but Rashawn, you can confirm. The answer is yes.
Sean, so what I think what they're asking is if it is a potential claim, right? So what we're covering is if it is an actual claim or if you get a regulatory claim. Now, when it's a potential claim, it could be an incident, like somebody might say something, but it's not exactly a claim. So in that scenario, we let the insurance company know and notify the claim. And depending on what the situation is, they might ask Gary or somebody to get involved and help them respond. Or we have the ARAG legal advice that's available in the policy, where they might get some pointers on the best way to respond.
Yeah, Rashawn, that's exactly what's happened. That, and that goes back to your point that anything that doesn't look good, report it. Now, look, as the lawyers working, being retained, we can't get involved in coverage. If the insurance should cover or not cover it, that's between the insurance company and the person who holds the insurance too. But you report it, it goes to Paisley Partners, then it goes to the insurance company. Then the insurance company does their own assessment, decides, gee, this is serious. We don't like how this is going. We think we want a lawyer involved. And even like in the recent past, we've been retained to assist naturopaths in that fashion on, things that look like they could be heading up to a complaint. And in fact, gave advice to avoid a complaint, which was successful too. Avoid a complaint and the lawsuit too. So, but again, the question is, does it cover it? And the answer is yes, but maybe, because it depends on the facts and circumstances too. But you're better off reporting it, because then if it is serious, then, and the insurance company agrees and the broker agrees, then you might get coverage for it. So I think that kind of addresses it too.
The other question is from Francis, who wants to ask about consent forms. If someone, following the IV pain in the arm example, had signed a consent form and noted that this is a possibility, does this not cover the complaint?
Okay. I think, Zarn, you want to handle that? start to, what do you think?
Sorry, Gary, do you mind repeating it? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
so
it cut out a bit.
so it's basically, it's about consent forms. Let's say the example, someone has IV pain in the arm. Let's say they signed a consent form and it was said you could have pain. Is that the end of the story?
No, because in terms of, there's a lot of different things that come up in a consent form and it is a risk, but at the same time, as a naturopathic doctor, you have to also do certain things to mitigate those risks. And so not only does that involve you, letting the patient know what the risks are, but also what to do appropriately to manage those risks. So in the particular case of an IV, if you have pain, for instance, there are certain things you can do to minimize the likelihood of pain occurring. And these things would be in your clinical judgment, but these would be things like icing the area after, elevating it after. So there are different things you can do to also reduce the risks. And these are things that we've seen in particular complaint scenarios where the college will say, as a naturopath, you should have known that there are A, B, and C things you can do to alleviate the chance of this particular risk occurring. So while it might be something that the patient has signed off on, it is still your responsibility as a naturopathic doctor to try to minimize those risks.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So on that point, in terms of even looking at the, let's say from the medical malpractice point of view, if someone sues you because, let's say in this case, let's say they have IV pain in the arm and then it's turned into this big problem too. And they're like, okay, now my arm hurts. I can't use my arm, whatever. They're going to sue. They're going to sue for at least two things. One is they're going to sue, oh, there's lack of informed consent. You never told me this was a risk. Now, if it's in the consent form, then it depends on, well, was it in the consent form? How was it worded? And more importantly, was it even explained properly in the consent form in terms of the risk? And was it discussed? That's one issue. But guess what? Even if you've given them proper informed consent, which is basically, oh, if we do this injection, you could have arm pain. You're still not necessarily legally off the hook because guess what? Even they consented to the possibility of pain, you're on the hook if you gave the injection and you didn't do it properly because then you didn't meet the standard of care. So just because you said, oh, your arm could hurt from the injection, it's still legally going to look at, did you still do the injection as you're supposed to do? And if you didn't, you could be on the hook legally for not meeting the standard of care, even if they consented. And even if you told them, oh, you could have pain too. So I think that kind of covers both aspects of that too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a continuation of Francis saying that's fair, as we would have best practice and mitigate the risk. That is why we have fully informed consent. I don't understand why I would have to pay for a patient who has a bruise on their arm when there are things like this that happen. We do have a pre and post IV form too.
Yeah. So that's from Francis, who's kind of following up on that too.
Yes.
So no one's saying you have to pay. It's like you got to look at the proper context. So like I said, when I get a file like this, I'm like, send me the records. I want to know what happened. And I look at everything. And then I give the naturopathic doctor the analysis and we go through with them. This is where I think this is what's going to happen. And by the way, if they make a complaint, this is what's going to happen too. What could happen, what you could be exposed to. And then you talk about, okay, how are ways to resolve it too. And sometimes it means like swallowing your pride, look big picture. Do you want to just be, defensive and no, I'm going to maintain my pride. I didn't do anything wrong. Let the college come and look. You could take that approach. To us, that's more risky because we see how the college, sometimes looks at things and finds things, looks at records and so on too. So I get it. You don't understand why you have to pay for something that could have happened too. And like even, not to go into any details, the case that we had there too, the problem was there were problems with, perhaps, I didn't go into it here, how the injection was done. So, now in other scenarios, it done perfectly, perhaps. But usually if there are other issues, our advice is we're trying to mitigate things. We're like, look, if this goes to the college, these things could happen too.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like the big picture discussion.
Yeah.
In the end, it's up for the naturopathic doctor to kind of discuss and, inform us too on what they want to do.
Yeah. I understand the issue, and Francis is Paul saying, then why have the consent forms then? If you have the consent form that says you might have pain, and then they still, it makes no sense. And which I have to say, I understand that, but the consent form is required, and I think it's like any other situation. If a patient's going to file a complaint, it doesn't matter whether you've got the consent forms or they said thank you for the treatment when they left. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it.
Yeah. But again, like I said, guess what the consent form doesn't state? I accept the risk that you might not do the injection properly. Like, you can't get consent to not do it. So yeah, why have consent forms? The law requires you don't necessarily need a consent form, but you need to obtain consent. And consent form is a good way to document it. That's why you have consent forms, to advise them the risk. But again, it's separate and apart, the consent issue from whether or not you did the treatment appropriately too. Again, just think of it like this. The consent form helps a lot if it's an adverse reaction and you didn't do anything wrong, but it's not a total, pass. Oh, I had a consent form. I told them they would get bruised. Well, that's fine. But what if you did the injection improperly? The consent form's not going to legally cover you for that.
Exactly. Okay. And there's there's two things going on. I'll ask the question, but somebody is asking to see the second to last slide, which talked about the key advice that's it there. Okay. And while that's being up, I think that's the slide that you wanted. There's a question from a participant asking whether or not, if an ND is delisted by an insurance company, does that ever get reversed?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot. Naturopathic doctors, more so from dentists. It's very tough
Yeah.
to do it because the practitioner has no relationship with the insurance company. It's the plan holder too. You're kind of at their mercy too. There are things perhaps you can complain to the insurance ombudsman, and I've discussed these. I can't tell you how many times I get contacted with dentists, naturopathic doctors, physiotherapists going, oh, I'm delisted. What can you do? It's not an easy solution. You're kind of at their mercy. They can do it. I guess you can sue them, but even that would be problematic because there's no contract between you and the insurance company. It's with the plan holder too. So the question was, what if you're delisted? Does it ever get reversed? What I usually, if someone comes to me, I'm like, okay, let me see all the facts. Let me see what's happened here, the letters you got. And, the best sometimes you could do is put together a proposal to kind of explain away their concerns, or maybe show them that they're barking up the wrong tree. Another thing you have to consider too is you can't just avoid the insurance company, because if you don't satisfy them, guess what? They're going to the college too. So sometimes even when, if we get involved at the stage where they're responding to insurance company, we're writing that letter assuming that it's going to make its way to the college, and to kind of set the stage for when the college gets involved, that you're already going to be on the record denying a lot of the things that the insurance company said.
Okay. And that's perfect timing. I don't see any other questions in the chat. If you do have additional questions, just email Paisley Partners, and we're keeping a record of all of them. So if we need to follow up, we can. Before we say goodnight for the evening, I wanted to remind everybody that our next webinar will take place on November the 4th, which is a Tuesday. You will receive an invite. All policyholders will receive an invitation and a link. The topic is an update on advertising, which has become, also another important topic. So an update and the do's and don'ts. With more naturopathic doctors working in multidisciplinary clinics, some issues have arisen that they may not be aware of. So mark it down in your calendar and watch your inbox for that email.
Yeah, could I add as a teaser to your for the next thing? A lot of the time, if you get a complaint with one of the regulatory colleges, a lot of the time they're going, oh, you know what? Let's take a look at their website. Let's take a look at their social media. They're like, okay, they don't have the resources to go and review every naturopathic doctor's website or social media. But if you walk into the college complaint, they're like, this is a good time to see your advertising, and that's how we see a lot of complaints, and more often than not they're going to find issues and problems. So join us at the next webinar.
And I think that Dr. Emily Bell is saying thank you very much. It was very informative. You're welcome, Emily.
Okay.
All right. So on that note, we wish everybody an enjoyable rest of their evening, and we look forward to seeing you again, hopefully on November the 4th. Good night, all.
Thank you, Sean, and to everyone from Paisley Partners and Megan and Zara, speaker as well, too. Thank you all.
Mm-hmm.